Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy and Kurt Leavins. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, David. Hello, Kurt.
The Stanley Cup Finals. Here we are.
Another series preview. We got to do more this year.
And they say men are happiest in the moment before the hunt. Well, we got like 5 a whole week to be happy because I'm happy too. It's a happy week, to kind of revel in it a little bit and
Absolutely.
And I think the time off honestly really helps the Oilers because they're the older team, and I think it's probably the more banged up team by all accounts. So this is that was good fortune for the Oilers. It was imperative, I thought, that they win in Game 6 to extend that, not just so they could beat Dallas, because they would have had a hard time in Game 7, but to give them that extra time off to rest, because rest is absolutely critical. So that was such a huge win. What do you guys think being here? It's been a long time.
Well, it sure beats talking about the draft. Here we are in June, and I'm not even sure what day the draft is.
I think it's the 28th, the 29th. The free agents come due on the 30th, and then UFA signing season opens on July 1st. And somewhere in there, the Oilers have to change out their general manager.
All I care about is Game 1.
Yeah, well, the finals could go till the 24th, so things are going to get pretty compacted back there, but it is well worth it. It's a good problem to have, as I think it was Jeff Jackson said.
100%.
Who can argue?
I wonder if on some level they haven't already changed out their general manager to Jeff Jackson, honestly. I wonder how much. Yeah. And Brad Holland, did you say?
I did.
Yeah, like there's no shortage of people there. So it's, there's a huge group of people. Anyway, Bruce, Kurt, we'll talk about all that kind of stuff later. Today, we will talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. Somehow, some way they did it, the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Finals against the Panthers of Florida with our Edmonton Oilers arch enemy Matthew Tkachuk leading the way for the bad guys. It's a great series because of that. I think without Tkachuk, there might be a feeling, for me at least, of like who are these guys? How meaningless to play on a certain level, a team from Florida. But because he's there, it just adds super sauce. It's just like, you're just taking 2 fistfuls of hot sauce and you're just pouring it all over that series because of this thing. So I'm looking forward to that. We will do a format today of 9 things in honor of our guest, Kurt Leavins, who does the 9 things every Sunday. And we'll just go around and we'll have, we'll do 1 thing each, 3 things apiece, 9 things in total. Kurt, why don't you start it off? What is your first thing? What's the first thing that you're thinking about for this playoff series?
The first thing I'm thinking about is what advantages do the Oilers have? How can they potentially win this series? And I think among those advantages that they do have is the fact that they have the 2 best hockey players in the series. They have Connor McDavid. They have Leon Draisaitl. With all due respect to Sam Reinhart, who had a fabulous year. With all respect to Alexander Barkov, who is maybe the best 2-way forward in the league. Neither one of them are McDavid and Draisaitl. And you know the old saying, if your best players can be the best players in the game, you'll win more often than you won't. And so I think the presence of those 2 elite, best in the world players is one of the key and critical edges that the Oilers will have against a very, very tough Florida Panthers.
Kurt, you listed the Florida best players and you didn't list Tkachuk. You listed, was that like a shot? Because I hope it was.
I certainly could have included him, but Reinhardt's the 50-goal man, and Barkov is the guy who I think everybody's anticipating is going to go up against either McDavid or Draisaitl or both. So that's why I picked those two.
If Barkov is the best two-way player in the NHL, is he not the best player? I mean, because hockey is offense and defense, and they're both equally important. If you're the best two-way player, are you not the best player in the NHL? If he really is that.
No, he's an 80-point player. You know, he's a little bit better than Anze Kopitar.
He's Anze Kopitar in his prime?
Yeah.
Anze in his prime.
I say so. I've equated those guys in the past as similar styles of players. Yep. Big, 200-foot, defensively responsible, strong offensive players that, have no real discernible weaknesses.
Yeah, a lot of comparables between those two players, I think. And all due respect to Kopitar was never the best player in the league either. So
just one of them.
Yeah, I'm really worried about Barkov, honestly. The people who have been watching, I've watched a bit of the Florida games. I found them kind of slow, to be honest. And I think this is because Florida smothers the other teams, takes the life out of them. And I can't say that Barkov really, he doesn't jump out, right? Kachuk jumps out, and some of the other players on that team, Sam Bennett jumps out at you, right? Like they really get your attention. But Kopitar doesn't really stand out. More so live, I actually find. If you're there live, Kopitar stands out because he's such a huge guy. So is Barkov, 6'3", 215 Barkov,
yep,
which is similar.
Same factory.
So I have monumental respect for centermen who play the defensive position with great conscientiousness, yep, and pride and skill. And it's been a problem on the Oilers forever, lacking that kind of center. Sean Horkoff did it in their playoff run. He was such an underrated player in that way. So I'm worried about Barkov becoming the dominant player in this series, because if he is able to shut down McDavid or Draisaitl at even strength, and that could be absolutely massive for Florida's chances in this series. You think that's going to happen, Kurt?
Nope.
Why not?
Because dozens of others have tried and failed. We heard that Philip Deneau was going to be the guy. We heard that Anze Kopitar was going to be the guy. We heard that JT Miller was going to be the guy, and so on and so on and so on. I said off the top, I think Barkov's a fabulous player, probably the best two-way player in the game. And if you were to ask me which Florida Panther am I most worried about, I'd probably say Barkov too. But Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. That's what gives me confidence. The best players, here's what I know. The very best players find a way. And I think one or both of those guys will.
Bruce, what do you think? Do you think that Barkov could emerge as the best player in this, or that McDavid and Draisaitl, are you as confident as Kurt, or what's your thought on the whole thing?
Well, I think if I'm Florida, I'm looking to limit McDavid and Draisaitl and not expecting of shutting them down, because that has been proven to be impossible. But you sure want to, keep them down to 1 point a game and not 2, right? But Barkov, assuming dangerously that Edmonton continues to run McDavid and Draisaitl on separate lines, which of course they don't always, Barkov can really only, pay full attention to one of them or half attention to the two of them. And then, you get a little bit deeper into the Florida group.
Yeah, I think I'm concerned that JT Miller was really a force against the Oilers. He was a huge force, and his line was a threat to the Oilers the entire time. And I am worried about this Barkov leading a line that's really going to give the Oilers hell this whole series. And my thought on the Oilers throughout the year is they're the only team that can beat themselves. They're the only team that can beat the Oilers, is the Edmonton Oilers. And so as much as I'm worried about Barkov, I do think it's in the hands of McDavid and Draisaitl. if they put their minds to it, to play the best two-way hockey of their lives, and the most physical hockey of their lives as well, they can get the better of Alexander Barkov, I believe. But it's going to take just a monumental amount of concentration and discipline from both of them, who both have had throughout the playoffs. There's been many a goal where they're the culprit, and they cannot be that player this series. They've got to out Barkov. They've got to bring a better two-way game than Alexander Barkov. They are both capable of doing so, but they haven't done it yet. So we'll see.
I got to say, I think you're overstating it, David. You know, that goal upon goal thing. Like, I think we can all think of instances where Draisaitl or McDavid could have been better on a goal. But I mean, it's not like they've been sieves the whole playoff. We've seen some of the best defensive play from both of them out of these playoffs. So I gotta say, I think you're overstating that.
I don't think I am, Kurt. And I'll just go to our numbers where we keep track of this, but we'll continue on. I think they've had in different series, both of them have had defensive letdowns, puck watching moments where they've been either the chief culprit or one of them.
I didn't say they didn't have some moments. I just think you're overstating it.
Barkov has the occasional one too. Nobody's perfect.
Nobody is perfect.
Even Patrice Bergeron has retired, right? So other than him.
That elusive, perfect defensive game, right?
And he was amazing to watch, Patrice Bergeron, because of his attention to detail in the defensive end. Always, especially as his career went along, on the right side of his man. And that was just darn impressive. Here we are.
At the end of the day, just to wrap up, I guess, if we can agree that if Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid play better than Sam Reinhart and Alexander Barkov, the Oilers have a very good chance of winning this series.
Yeah, just like LA. To beat LA, you had to outplay Kopitar. And they did.
Yep.
They did.
Yep.
Bruce,
what is your first thing?
Well, I'm keying in on special teams, which I happen to be writing about today. And it's just staggering what Edmonton has done in the playoffs to this point. They played 18 games, and their special teams have yet to be outscored in a single game. They've either broken even or more often come out ahead in terms of power play minus their power play goals in the game. And over the course of the three series, Edmonton scored an amazing 19 power play goals. Florida's second in the league with 14 and way more opportunities. And on the shorthanded side, Oilers have allowed 3, which isn't quite the best in the league because a couple of teams that got knocked out in the first round only let in 2. Well, it's just in. Edmonton played 3 rounds of playoffs and they gave in 3 power play goals in 18 games, 2 complete series without a power play goal against. And they even kicked in a shorthanded goal and a great big one in the last series. So overall, Edmonton, it's quite remarkable, really. They've outscored every opponent in the playoffs, but at 5-on-5 and 4-on-4, when you mush it all together, 40 goals for, 40 goals against. And when you look at special teams, when you mush all them in together, 20 goals for, 3 goals against, for a gigantic plus, basically a plus goal per game. And they've been, outscoring their opponents by basically plus 1 goal per game, and it's all been that special teams performance. And that said, Florida is second in the league in both categories. Well, Edmonton's plus 17, Florida's at plus 7. So they will give Edmonton a challenge, but there's no question that through 3 rounds in the playoffs, Edmonton's special teams have been dominant to the point that I would be interested to see how they would check out against other teams, including past Cup champions. 20-3 is off the charts. Good. If they can keep delivering, plus 1 a game on special teams, I like their chances a whole lot.
It's interesting listening to some of the other podcasts and commentators who have been watching Florida closely, and they're just so impressed with the aggressiveness of Florida's penalty kill. And of course, we've seen the Oilers play against the passive penalty kill in LA. one that started out as passive and got tougher in Vancouver, and then one that was pretty non-passive, as much aggressive as they could be in Dallas. And of course, the Oilers killed LA, did well against Vancouver, and then figured out in the end how to score against Dallas. So I think so much of, like, if you think that Florida's special teams are great, so much of it is who they've played so far, the quality of their competition. And suddenly things could change if you're up against the best power play in the NHL, which I think the Oilers have. Adam Fox, I think, was playing hurt in these playoffs. I heard that, and he didn't look like the same player.
To me.
And that's critical to New York's success. He's their best player and their best power player, I think. So we'll see. We'll see how Florida does.
Make the same case for Quinn Hughes in the Vancouver series.
He was hurt. Just to refer back to the goal, like the mistakes on goals against, and it's debatable. Like, these are the numbers that Bruce and I keep, and we debate over it. And so McDavid, I'll just compare them to the 4 top defensemen on time on ice, because centers have a ton of defensive responsibility, similar, although not the same as defensemen, but similar. So they're the most likely players. You can't compare them to wingers. So Darnell Nurse, we've tagged him with 14 major mistakes on even strength goals against in the playoffs so far. Bouchard is at 10. McDavid's at 10. Cece's at 9. Ekholm's at 9. And Draisaitl's at 7. So I think that McDavid's rate has gone up in the playoffs. Now, none of this shouldn't be surprising. He's, compared to the regular season, his rate's gone up because they're playing much more difficult competition in the playoffs. But I just find my main point is this, Kurt, that they are so great offensive players. Are so focused on the puck, and they're so desperate to win that puck and stop the defensive rush, the defensive play, that sometimes they can lose track of the danger man. And I think McDavid has been guilty of that in these playoffs, as has Leon Draisaitl. And again, it's the hardest thing in hockey is watching for that player and covering him. But this is what they have to do in this playoff series. And I think this is how they eventually beat Vancouver and beat Dallas, is that McDavid, I really noticed it in the last 3 games against Dallas and for the whole team. They became very, very strong at looking for the danger man and not becoming too puck focused and focusing on that guy who's coming into the play, who's going to kill them on the goal against. So that's what I think is, when I'm bringing up that key for those 2 players, I think it's a particular issue for them because of their offensive focus. And they did it pretty well against Dallas. They wouldn't have beat Dallas if that didn't happen. So just got to happen again.
They sure shut down that cherry picking play that Dallas was using. Dallas used it when they crushed Edmonton 5-0 late in the season. And they were doing all that counterattacking. And the first couple games of this series, the long bomb up to typically Dodonov, which is a Russian word actually meaning cherry picker. And that seemed to be his role. But what they would do, Dallas, was sometimes they even have 2 forwards up there. And even if Edmonton had 2 defensemen back, well, if the third Dallas forward joined the rush first, trouble. And Edmonton's forward started to read it and started to be on top on the right side of the puck, in my view. Maybe Kurt, you with your playing time expertise might confirm that, or you might have seen something different that they were doing.
Yeah, it's I think there was a subtle difference in their shading in the neutral zone as that series went on. And the other thing that changed, and I don't think this was an accident, is the increased responsibilities of Brett Kulak. Putting a guy with the wheels that Kulak has on your second pairing, I think was one of the factors that helped limit that, because when you compare the foot speed between Desharnais, who I've got lots of time for, and Kulak, well, Kulak is the guy who's better equipped to handle a play like that. So I think that was a factor as well.
He had to move up to the second pairing. He had earned it. And it's just a better use of Kulak to give him that ice time. Now he did get caught once on a rush, and I think there was a goal even on the play, if I'm not mistaken. McDavid was backing him up, and then he wasn't. Holloway got caught out a couple. Holloway got caught out a couple times actually, where he was actually backing up he was in position to back up the defenseman, but he forgot to skate backwards and actually do it. And there was a couple odd man rushes in the final few games because of his mistakes. But I thought as it went along, the Oilers were not giving up that many odd man rushes at all and doing a really good job covering the danger man. So these are the key things for the Oilers to do if they're going to win. They've been working on this a long time, all season long, and they're getting it. They're getting better. My first thing is Florida's style of play being uniquely suited to take advantage of what I think can be a problem for the Oilers. I think the way to beat the Edmonton Oilers, and I have no idea why the LA Kings didn't do this, and we were remarking on them, they hired back that coach, Kurt, and maybe the coach was just saying, well, I was sticking with the old game plan like he ordered me to do, and I'm going to change everything. But to beat the Edmonton Oilers, you have got to forecheck the Edmonton Oilers. And the more physical you are in the forechecking, the better for your team. And Vancouver, I think the success Vancouver had against the Oilers came because of that. They had a number of forwards who were hard on the forecheck, physical, getting in there, led by Miller. And they gave the Oilers everything that there was to give and almost won that series. So Dallas is an interesting team because they forecheck super hard, but they're not physical. They're not particularly a physical team. And they were actually, I think, one of the least in terms of hits per 60 as a team. They were one of the lowest hits per 60. So Dallas is a fascinating team in that they're super diligent and fast on the forecheck, but they're not physical. Well, Florida brings the worst of everything in terms of the Oilers. They're the Oilers' worst nightmare, so to speak, because they forecheck like crazy, try to smother you, play the game in your end, and they're physical. They hit, and they're dirty, and they're nasty on the forecheck. I think this could give the Oilers real trouble. And I think they could give Stuart Skinner real trouble. On the Ray and Dregs podcast today, Ray Ferraro was talking about what he saw as Skinner's particular weakness, and I think he nailed it. It's been on my mind for the last couple of days. Pucks coming from below the goal line out in front of the net. That's where Stu Skinner loses track of the puck, as he did on a shot from Matt Duchene that by all rights should have been in the net last game. And he did it on the goal. He got all flubbered on that play and twisted out of shape, and they scored on it. I think this is Skinner is doing a great job right now. Shots coming right at him. But when I'm always nervous with the puck coming out of the corner and from behind the net, and that's how Florida scores a lot of goals. I've seen them score a lot of goals in recent years. Big goals. Matthew Tkachuk down there coming out front with that puck, swinging out front, or Bennett, Reinhart, Barkov. So in terms of my concern about the Oilers, that's the biggest one. This is a major challenge. And the question is, how do you handle it? So a lot of people are saying, bring in Vinny, bring in a big player. I'm not so sure about that. I think the quick, deft puck movement is probably the best solution. And if Broberg can hold up physically to the pressure, the physical and mental pressure that's going to be put on him and the pressure of the stage, he's the guy that's most likely to help, along with Kulak, Nurse. Like the other guys are, Ceci can struggle with this. Darnell Nurse can struggle with this, especially if he's teamed up with DeHarnay or Ceci, who are already struggling with it. Ekholm and Bouchard are really good at this. I think Broberg is really good at it. So I'm actually hoping he stays in and gets the job done. But because I think that's what gets the job done. Kulak is really good at this. So it's more like Ceci, DeHarnay, Nurse, who I have, and especially Nurse in combination with those other two guys who really do struggle. So
well,
how do you think they'll handle it?
I know I called you on the earlier one. I'll agree with you on this one. I think the Dallas forecheck is really going to present a major issue for the Oilers. And I've had the same DeHarnay Broberg thought that you have. And I'm not sure which way they should go and which way will be better. And we might not know until halfway through game one. But I think you can make a case for either one of them. DeHarnay is certainly the guy that's going to be better to withstand the physical punishments that's sure to come. But there's no question that Broberg is superior at transporting the puck. And so I think that one choice that the Oilers make on defense is probably going to be critical to this. I have a higher level of degree of confidence in Darnell Nurse on this, because pure and simple, because of Nurse's wheels. Well, I think we all think that Nurse seems to be less than 100% physically right now. I have no evidence that it's his feet. And the one thing that Darnell can do as good or better than maybe any defenseman on that team is turn and get the puck. And he's going to have to be on that part of his game, because they'll be coming at him hard.
Yeah, he's fast. Desharnais, honestly, I think it is the critical decision too, Kurt. And I think if he hadn't made that decision, they wouldn't have beat Dallas. I think it was that important, because the Dallas forecheck was starting to get to Desharnais. It was breaking him down, and he needed to be out of there for a while. Now maybe he's ready to go back in, and maybe he was injured too. There was that brutal slew foot he took in LA. Maybe it all caught up to him, but he was starting to really weigh down the team with his puck moving, which was just terrible in the last couple of games that he played. Honestly, in all fairness to him, it was a major problem. And Broberg came in and solved it immediately, which was amazing for Broberg, because he's had confidence problems in the past at the NHL level, but he came through. How do you see it?
Game 6, where I think there was only 2 Oilers that had CFs over 50, and Broberg's was over 60.
Yeah.
The puck was going the right direction when he was on the ice, and they weren't sheltering him much, right? He was.
And all 5 of the other defensemen were getting crushed. So, even his own partner and the other minutes that he played with other guys got crushed to the point that they were all 30, 20%. And, really low numbers. And Broberg was holding his own. I don't think he did get the toughest minutes, but the minutes he was out there was not the time Edmonton was in any kind of trouble.
Yep, agree.
There was little shelter in that game. It was a tropical storm blowing in, and they were just coming for the Oilers. And he held up. I was impressed with the guy. He played better than I had hoped. And I think a lot of the player. All right, let's move on to the next round of things. The 4th thing overall, Kurt, your second thing. What is it?
Is that the Oilers' most physical players are going to have to bring it this series, because I don't think there's any question that Florida's grittiest players are going to be bringing it. And I'm sure part of their plan is to be in the face of the Oilers all night long. And so if you list off the most physical players that the Oilers have, I think this is a big opportunity for Darnell Nurse to bring what typically has been a strength of his. And I think it's fair to argue that that strength hasn't been as apparent the last couple months. But he is that big, mobile, tough, mean defenseman on this roster that we need in a series like this, and he's got to bring it. Evander Kane, if he's healthy enough, we all know about the sports hernia, I think his performance will be critical. If Desharnais plays, I think Sam Carrick will probably play game 1 because he's the more physical player. I think Corey Perry will play game 1, and probably 4 out of the 7 games, if not 5, because he's the more physical player. I think Dylan Holloway, if he plays physical, will be a key to the series. And I do think that we have not seen the last of Warren Foegele, who isn't necessarily big, tough, and physical, but is big and fast and can be effective on the forecheck. I think those bigger Oiler players really are going to have to bring it, because I think this is going to be a war.
I'm confident to add a few names to your list too there, Kurt. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Zach Hyman.
Yeah.
All of whom have been bringing it. Hyman's been just pounding on guys. This is the most physical I can recall him playing. And McDavid, that's an element to his game that's always sort of lurking. That at any time he could run over somebody. And, with his speed and coordination, well, he can hit hard. And if they're tormenting him, that's one of his solutions. So, thankfully, we've got, in terms of the big players, there are guys that can look after themselves. I mean, you could make the case that Nugent Hopkins is not a power forward by any description, but the other three actually kind of answer that box, or check that box at least to a degree.
Nugent Hopkins, it's
He wins
essential for
battles.
him. It's essential for him to stick
right.
his nose in there and win battles. And he started doing that halfway through the Vancouver series, which was a turning point for him and the Oilers in the playoffs. Kurt, I'm going to disagree with you on one of these things. I think Corey Perry has had some good games in the playoffs, but it's too hard to say the myth. I was about to say the myth of him being a physical player. I mean, I think he wants to be a physical player, but he's not fast enough to get in there and hit. And I'll just segue into my thing, which is lineup changes that I think might have to happen as early as the first game. So Derek Ryan is averaging 11.5 hits per 60, and Corey Perry's at 5.7 hits per 60. Derek Ryan's twice as many hits on a rate basis as Corey Perry. Corey Perry.
Corey Perry's line has the puck more often than Derek Ryan's does.
I don't know about that.
Gotcha.
I just don't see the physical play from. I can't remember him hitting anyone. Like
from the blue line in, I'd put him up against anybody on their lineup, and everybody knows that Corey Perry doesn't have the neutral zone speed that he used to. I 100% agree with you on that. From the blue line in, I think he'll be a very important physical player in this series. And as I'm sure you agree, physical isn't just hitting.
Puck protecting and all that stuff.
Going, right?
And I'd say he's had some good games puck protecting and making plays. He's had a couple good games. Like, let's say he's played 13 games in the playoffs. Out of those 13 games, I've probably liked him maybe 4 of the games. And I think he was overused for someone his age early in the playoffs. And I think he should probably be playing every second game. So I'm content with that. And I think he can help, but I just don't, in the games where he's off, like game 6, for instance, where I was like, hit somebody, win a board battle. Just before, for instance, Draisaitl shot the puck over the glass. The puck came up to Corey Perry on the boards, veteran player, third period, one job, get it out. He lost the battle. It went back to Draisaitl, and Draisaitl shot it over the board. So that's the kind of play that had me thinking, man, if I was to take someone out, it wouldn't be Derek Ryan. It would be Corey Perry. And Ryan, was culpable on the goal. On the one goal, he was one of the players who didn't shut down the crease play, so he didn't have a perfect game either. But
I think it's always going to be a Ryan Carrick flip. I think those two guys are interchangeable in this particular lineup, and kind of like you're saying about Perry, I kind of feel the same way about Derek Ryan. I like Derek Ryan a lot, but I'm not sure he's equipped to play all 7 games of this series.
Fair enough, Kurt. I would put in Foegele over Perry at this point. I just think he will bring more to the Oilers. In both, now Foegele's hits are 10 per game, and again Perry's are 5.7 per game. I just think Foegele will bring more in terms of forechecking, keeping the puck in, getting the puck out. I just think he's a slightly better player than Corey Perry is right now. So when
the game's on the line, I'll take Corey Perry. Thanks.
So those are some of the changes. And we've already, I guess, dealt with the big decision, Desharnais, Broberg. I think they'll stick with Broberg because it's worked, and for game 1. But I think we might see a line change. Florida has 2 heavy top lines, and I think that they're going to have. I like actually Ryan McLeod. I know a lot of people don't. I don't mind Ryan McLeod with Leon Draisaitl. I think he's speed. He adds speed, and he's a conscientious defensive player, and can fill in for Leon. He will cover. He will be he's a solid F1 when Leon's often leading the attack, right? And he's last man back to the zone because of it. And I don't have any problem with that. But it's really good to have Ryan McLeod back there as F1 than as opposed to someone else. As opposed, let's say, Evander Kane. But I think we will probably see Kane and Holloway, I'm guessing, with Draisaitl, 2 big, heavy players. Offensive players. They'll hope to get the forecheck going. They'll hope to get some offensive play out of those guys. And the third line then would be McLeod, Henrique, and player X, who I would pick Foegele, and some others would pick Perry. Perry will, if they go that route, Perry will have had a long rest. And his first game back, I thought it was his best game back when he came back after being sat down. I thought that was his best game of the playoffs. And so if it's him, so be it. I mean, the coach knows what he's doing. But I'd like to see, or you could have Carrick on the fourth line, and you could put Ryan Fogle and McLeod. Except now they got to play Henrique, so they're going to play Adam Henrique, such a key player. So it'll be Adam Henrique, Ryan McLeod, and we'll see who the third one is. Thoughts, guys?
Nice to have options.
Yeah.
These are all NHL players that we're talking about. We did find in the last series that a few games, the 12th forward was only playing 6 or 7 minutes. Carrick in the last game, I think Ryan the game before, of course Kane in the last game got hurt, so that doesn't really count. But I mean, we do know that the Oilers have a top 6 that can play a lot of minutes, especially, the top 4 or so guys that can play a lot of minutes. But they got 4 lines of NHL players plus substitutes that are NHL caliber. So the depth of this team is, I would say, it's strongest that it's been in the last, at least 5 years of being in the playoffs anyway.
Yeah. I was sitting around thinking today how as the playoffs have gone on and as Adam Henrique has gotten healthier and healthier, he's played a bigger and bigger role for this club. And I can't help but think that any success that our third line will have in this series, he'll be a major part of it. And in addition to that, he's been able to take some of the face-off heat off Leon Draisaitl, because that's a guy in Henrique who not only can you count on him to win a face-off deep in your own zone, but once the face-off has happened, he's such a cerebral player. He makes such good decisions that you can kind of count on him without the puck as well. So I think however these lines line up, and I tend to agree for the most part with how David's lined them up, but I think Henrique will be a linchpin in that third line.
He scored the first goal of an Oilers third liner in the playoffs, and he did it in the third round of the playoffs. In the first round, he was playing left wing with McDavid. Of course, he got hurt in the last game, basically missed the Vancouver series except for one aborted start. And by the third round, when they did bring him back in, he scored the tying goal in Game 3. That was the first goal of anybody on the third line had scored in the playoffs, and it was basically his first game on the unit. So it, at least, adding him at that level on the depth chart certainly strengthens that line. And then subsequently, other guys on that line have started to put the puck in the net a little bit as well. But it was a big breakthrough for anyone to get one at that point that Henrique finally did.
And what a luxury having like Henrique and Kulak, who you could install on the penalty kill when you take out Desharnais and Fogle,
right.
2 guys. So Henrique is 55% on faceoffs, leading the team. And next best, Sam Carrick, 51.6, Ryan McLeod, 50.4, Draisaitl, 49.6, McDavid, 45.6. So yeah, Adam Henrique, we might even see a reconstitution at some point of the top line of Henrique, Hyman, and McDavid, moving Nugent Hopkins somewhere else, wherever he's needed. So, but I agree with you, Bruce. I remember when the Oilers were down a game to both Dallas and Vancouver, the knives and immediately came out for Ken Holland, of course. Yeah, they're lightly sheathed. They're still out. They are. And one of the ridiculous things was he made a terrible trade for Adam Henrique at the trade deadline. Look, he's only played 1 game or whatever it was at the time, five games, and I mean, he's injured. Players get injured. It's not Ken Holland's fault that the guy he did expend quite a bit of assets for to acquire Adam Henrique was injured.
He out in his crystal ball. How dare he?
Yeah, what a ridiculous comment. Like, I mean, when he did play, Adam Henrique was a good player, and at the end of the last game, they put out, I think, Henrique Brown and maybe it was Janmark or Nuge. It was a Nuge right at the end. I thought, yes, Last minute of the game, coach, this is what we've been needing all year. Your best defensive players on the ice in the last minute of the game. And he was out there, and it was a breath of fresh air. So I think, yeah, that was a big acquisition. I'm glad he's getting healthier and is almost fully healthy now, apparently. And because he is a good player, he's a smart player, and he's always what I like, because I'm a stickler for defense, is he's on the right side of his check in his own zone, consistently as any Oilers forward is, other than Matthias Janmark perhaps and Connor Brown. So he is I love his defensive game, and
he finishes his checks too, eh?
He hits. He's a big hitter.
He does hit.
Kind of does a little bit of everything when you think about
it. Indeed. Yeah. Boy, speaking of finishing their checks, Florida has a ton of guys with a lot of hits. I was meaning to say this just to give you some numbers. So Florida right now is, of all the teams in the NHL in hitting, is 5th out of the 16 playoff teams. They're averaging 42.5 hits per 60. They were the top hitting team in the regular season at 28.2 hits per 60. So they've amped it up for the playoffs by 14 hits a game. The Oilers are 13th out of 16th at 30.5 hits, again, compared to 42.5 hits per 60 for Florida. So the Oilers are down there. But the Oilers, this is worth pointing out, the Oilers have faced a team, the number one hitting team in the playoffs, of the LA Kings, 49 hits per 60, out hitting what the Florida. So it's not like the Oilers haven't faced a major physical team coming at them and gotten the best of them. And that's, to me, that was encouraging. What's that, Kurt?
Where are the Canucks on that list?
Because I don't have the list in front of me, but I think they were like 6th or 7th, something in there.
Yep.
Because they were a physical team too. Dallas wasn't. Dallas was right at the bottom of the list, near the bottom. Not a hitting team. That wasn't their style of play.
I'm just bringing it up. It was Tampa, Los Angeles, Toronto, Boston, then Florida, then Vegas, then Winnipeg. And what these teams have in common is that 6 of them went out in the first round, or 5 of them went out in the first round, when hitting was insane.
Yes.
Like, all the series started off, and all the hit counters were drinking 3 Red Bulls a period. And they were just going click, 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 click. There's a hit, there's a hit. And there was a lot of hitting, but, it was maybe double normal, not triple like they were counting them. But the teams just couldn't maintain that. Like, typically the first round is the most physical, and the teams that survive that sort of start playing something a little closer to normal hockey again in the subsequent rounds. And sure enough, we see here that Dallas and Edmonton have dropped well down the pack. Whereas if you looked at this set of stats after the first round, it would be more mixed of, successful and unsuccessful teams. But all that's left at the top now are the teams that played 5 or 6 games and, left it all out there but lost.
Pretty much. Bruce, what is your next thing? We're on number 6 in total.
Yeah, Florida's 3 lines. I'm impressed with the depth up front. And a couple of subtle players in here, but I mean, it's first line, Barkov between Carter Verhaeghe, who's a fantastic player to me, and Sam Reinhart, is one deadly line with 2 snipers on the wing and a terrific two-way playmaker in the middle. I mean, that's an intimidating line in terms of the skill they bring. Then the second line is an intimidating line in terms of the intimidation they bring, with Sam Bennett down the middle, who is to me, vicious player who hits to hurt and is very good at what he does. Like, he's a very committed headhunter. I'm not saying he hits to head, but he doesn't care where he hits. He'll go through the guy that he's hitting. And he's lined up with another ex-Calgary Flame in Matthew Tkachuk on one wing, and underrated but good player Evan Rodriguez on the other side. And then their third line features a couple more Finns. I got 4 Finns on that team. Scary. Too many Finns for opposing team. Oh, I liked Edmonton when we had 4 Finns. And 2 of them are Anton Lundell, the center on that line, and Eetu Luosterainen, the left winger. And both those guys consistently grab my eye when I see them play. And, they don't sort of jump off the statistics page. And in the playoffs, like Lundell's got 12 points in 17 games, pretty good. And +7, pretty good. And Luosterainen has got 6 points. And the other guy, Vladimir the Tank Tarasenko, that they got at the trade deadline, 6 points in 17 games only. And he had a long, like 9 or 10 games without a point, I believe, before he finally scored the series winning goal against Rangers to, get himself back in the mix nicely. 6 foot, 225 pounds. You wonder why they call that guy the Tank? Wowza. And then the fourth line is a little more big guys and not necessarily great players, but guys that will mix it up. And Stenlund, Kevin Stenlund, Stephen Lorentz, Karl Okposo, and
Nick
I'm
Cousins.
not quite sure. Yeah, Nick Cousins is not in the mix, and I'm not quite sure where Ryan Lomberg has gone. Yet another ex-Flame. And 3 ex-Flames are among Florida's toughest players, and you wonder what the hell Calgary was doing to let them all get away.
Sam Bennett's career just took off as soon as he got out of Calgary. It's just weird, eh? He
You
just
know,
must have had a real problem with the coach, Sutter.
I was going to say that I think Sam Bennett has the chance to be a real critical player in this series, and
Absolutely.
I never felt that Calgary really appreciated what they had in that player. There was all the talk of Johnny Hockey, and I get it, but I always thought Sam Bennett had a pretty intriguing ceiling, and I think we're seeing it now. And Alexander Barkov is getting all the talk at center, and for all the right reasons. But Sam Bennett in that 2C slot, I think his performance will be critical in this series.
Yeah, well, he's got 6 goals and 4 assists in 12 games. He missed some time. He got banged up in the first series, and he came back partway through the second one. And so he's a little behind in terms of games played, but he's was he 3rd on the team in goals and 5th or 6th in points among forwards.
It just seems
and
to
that's
be
just part of.
Sorry, and I was just going to say, it just seems to be the kind of guy who's built to play this time of year, right?
Yeah, and that fourth line, all they do is hit. They just get out there, hit. They're among the league leaders. They're the league leaders in hits, like Lorentz and Lomberg and guys like that. And Stenlund hits a lot. They're just expect just a torrent of body contact when they take the ice.
Yeah, well, Bennett, his signature play in my memory, and this would be very specific, that wouldn't cross a lot of people's minds. It was a Saturday night game between Edmonton and Calgary in the middle of the regular season. I think it was the silo season, 21. And 14 seconds into the first shift for Slater Kukuk in that game. So there was the game had no history at all. They just dropped the puck. They were skating around. And Sam Bennett hit Slater Kukuk with as vicious a body check as you can imagine, put him out of the game, put him out of the lineup for weeks. And it was just sort of, why do you even do that? It was clearly I'm going to run you over and put you out. It was one of those. And you got to watch for that from that guy, because he could do that at any time.
Yeah. I mean, Bouchard and Ekholm haven't taken a lot of hitting yet. Interestingly, you'd think a strategy would be hit Evan Bouchard, just like, the Oilers went after Quinn Hughes and Drew Doughty. We may see that this series in a big way. Now, Bouchard's is also slick enough and smart enough to make the play before he gets blasted, but that can change. It just takes one really nasty hit. And these guys have plenty of players capable of throwing such a hit. So that's going to be interesting. We're on to the final round. We're up to the 7th thing. Kurt.
For the first time in these playoffs, the Oilers are playing a team that I don't believe has a true number 1 defenseman. They have an excellent blue line. that Aaron Ekblad has never turned into the level of player that I think most people thought he was going to be. Still an excellent player, don't get me wrong. But I think most people would agree, and when you look at a lot of the rankings that are put out, most people agree that their best defenseman is Brandon Montour. And Montour certainly, when a change was made on the blue line in Florida and it gave Montour way more ice time and way more opportunity, he certainly wrapped his arms around that and stepped up to the plate and hit a home run. I think he's been their best defenseman over the last 2 years. However, he's not Drew Doughty, he's not Quinn Hughes, and he's not Miro Heiskanen. And so I think that presents an interesting case for the Oilers, where they're used to knowing that there's an elite defenseman at the other end of the ice. This time, while I think that Florida has a very complete defense, and even their third pairing guys, Ekman, Larson, and Kulikov, are very capable NHL veterans, there isn't quite the elite status that comes with Florida's defense that we've seen in the previous 3 series. And to go full circle, if we come back to the fact that the Oilers, in my books, have the best 2 players in the series, is that an opportunity for them to take advantage of that? I don't mean to suggest that this is a gaping hole for Florida. They're a good defensive team for a reason. They've got a good, solid defense, but they just don't have one guy that's at the same level as those other 3 guys that I listed off. And Gustav Forsling, for the terrific playoff that he's had, and I believe he's leading Florida's D-men in points in the playoffs.
Yes, 11 points.
But Evan Bouchard has more than double that.
Yep.
Forsling, I'm concerned that
he plays power play.
Oh, he doesn't. And I'm concerned that Forsling is the kind of defensive defenseman with the speed and agility to, like a Josh Morrissey, Dylan DeMello. Like, there's some defensemen who are uniquely suited to stopping McDavid because they can really frickin' skate. And they're really great agile backwards skaters. Now, even if that player exists like Miro Heiskanen, and he can be beat in moments.
We saw that in game 6.
We did. We will never forget it. We will never forget Connor McDavid beating Miro Heiskanen. But my concern with Florida is they do have that defenseman like Vlasic in his prime in Forsling, who might be able to shut down McDavid and assist. Like, if you get a Barkov-Forsling combination on McDavid at even strength, I am really worried about that. Like, seriously, like, that to me is a major concern if they can really limit Connor McDavid at even strength. And it's happened. It's happened in the playoffs with Connor McDavid. He's gone supernova some series, and he's been taken out some series with outstanding defensive play against Colorado, against Winnipeg. So we'll see about that. So they might not have great defensemen, but they might have that defenseman with a unique skill, which is really dangerous for the Edmonton Oilers' chances. As you know, Aaron Ekblad, talk about looking 35 when you're 17 years old. Like, he looked like Paul Bunyan when he was 17 years old, Aaron Ekblad. And he was such a great junior hockey player. He's been injured again and again and again, I think. And that's probably what's held him back. It's interesting that Montour I think he's got the most time on ice of every Florida defenseman. I mean, I don't know, it's Ekblad and Forsling are one pair.
Yeah,
and I guess Nicola and Montour. Yeah, like someone said to you 2 years ago that you'd be facing a team in the finals and those would be the 4 defensemen, you'd think, bring it. But these guys might be better than their reputation suggests, just as Brett Kulak is, right? Yep. What kind of reputation does Brett Kulak have? What do the average fan around the league think of him? Probably not a whole heck of a lot. And there'd be some fans in Edmonton who would underestimate Kulak still, even though 3 playoffs in a row, he's been an outstanding player. So we might be running into a situation of multiple Kulaks on their defense, underrated guys. So I don't know. I haven't seen them enough, Kurt, to say.
Yeah.
Are you confident of this opinion? Like, have you watching them enough to say that, do you think?
Well, what I know is that none of those guys are Doughty, Hughes, or Heiskanen.
Yes, and that's
they're not.
Fair enough. And they don't have that guy.
That's the difference with this opponent as opposed to the previous 3.
Well, Hughes was the good news because he was hurt. Like he just was I think he was like 60% of Quinn Hughes, and that was a huge benefit to the Edmonton Oilers. Heiskanen, I don't think was hurt, and just
I think they played him too much.
yeah, they wore him down, and I don't think he has that elite, like the highest level of offensive ability. Heiskanen, as great a player as he is, he's not Hughes or Makar or Bouchard.
Agreed.
So, but yeah, I that is an area of well, and then the bottom pair like Ekman Larson. I mean, we watched Ekman Larson deteriorate for a number of years. Maybe he's found his game again. Maybe he's healthy. Like health is so huge, right?
Yeah.
And we saw Kulikov closely for a playoff season and a few years ago, and it was somewhat underwhelming. It wasn't like overwhelming. So we'll see. I hope you have that right. Yeah, he did get benched. And who did they put in? I can't remember. Anyway, just someone unexpected.
I think it was Cuckoo.
I think you're right, Bruce. Yeah.
I think you're right too, Bruce.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Cuckoo was playing well that year.
Well, other than the 6 weeks he missed when Bennett put him out, but yeah.
Yeah. We're talking about injuries, or we have been all through here, and my next thing is injuries, and it's such a huge factor in the playoffs. And I don't know if the Oilers get by Vancouver without Quinn Hughes at 66%, without Thatcher Demko out, and in the crucial last game, Brock Besser's out with his blood clotting problems. I don't know if you get by Dallas if Evander Kane doesn't wing that shot off that guy's foot, because he was not the same player after that, and they were not the same team after that. They weren't able to contain the Oilers. Like everyone goes on about how the Oilers went on this big run of scoring. Well, kind of coincides with Chris Tanev getting a bad foot injury. He was not as fast. He was not as effective. He took a bad penalty on Hyman. He was responsible, as I recall, on a couple goals against, at least one that I recall. And so injury is huge. And the Oilers are the older team, and going in, they seem like the more banged up team. So there's this Kurt. I hadn't actually heard about Nurse. You know, he did have 11 hits the other game, but if we heard that he had a bad shoulder or was injured in some way, bad elbow or something that prevented him from hitting, that would be no surprise. McDavid has been fighting something. He looked pretty good beating Heiskanen, of course, last game, but maybe it's his, who knows what it is. Like, is it something in his shooting? Is it something that takes away a bit of his explosiveness? Draisaitl with the bad back, Kane with the sports hernia, which is, he's played pretty well for a guy with an injury. I mean, Kane's been amazing, and but these injuries, this is the wild card in the playoffs. We don't know who's going to get hurt or if anyone's going to get hurt, and what that's going to mean. But it will. My point is, it dramatically altered the last two series the Oilers were in, I believe, against Vancouver and Dallas, and in the end, injury worked for the Oilers with Tanev and Besser and to some extent Hughes and definitely Demko. So it's just an unknown, and we'll see what happens there. But it's going to be a factor.
At least we got no one sort of going into the series that's, been lost. Like if Kane had been knocked out in that last game, it would have really changed the landscape. But Coach Knobloch was confident that he would be playing in game one, and having these few days off is probably helpful to Kane in particular.
I have a question, guys.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Because I agree with you that injuries are going to be a thing. What one Oiler that has not played in the playoffs yet do you think we might see in the final?
Well, if you're saying Sam Gagner, like 5 stars for you, because I'd love to see. I think I've been saying if he plays, he scores. First game in, he's going to score. That's my prediction. I just think he's going to do it, and if he gets in, he'll do it. Is that what you're thinking, Kurt?
Well, yeah, I was
not that he'll score, but
an open question in general. But on the Gagner topic, your point on Corey Perry. I agree that I don't think Corey Perry can play every game. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, the Gagner for Perry is not a bad substitution.
It's the best swap there is. They're not special teams. You got room for one of those guys in your bottom 6 because the other guys are all penalty killers. Perry comes out, you don't necessarily have to replace him with the PK, or you could replace him with a different offensive-minded winger, which is Gagne. I'm actually surprised we haven't seen him to this point.
Yep.
He looked a little overwhelmed in his one game. Like he didn't get a lot of ice time when he came back to Edmonton.
Right at the end?
Yeah, he didn't show well. But that doesn't necessarily mean much. It was kind of a weird nothing game. So I'll tell you what, if they start Sam Gagne in Edmonton, they have him starting the game like his wild.
Crowd will lose their
Eardrums will be lost in that moment. Put it that way. Like it's be worse than the worst rock concert. Put in your earbuds or your earplugs if Sam Gagne is in the starting lineup. People will be they'll be weeping. They'll be so happy. Some of my friends are I have one friend in particular, huge Sam Gagne fan, and can't believe he hasn't been in the playoffs yet. And I was on Oilers now, and I put it to Bob, like maybe Sam Gagne should get in, and Bob just immediately tutted that. So I don't know. Maybe he's injured. I have no idea, but I thought he would be an interesting addition.
Yeah. Any other name come to your mind, guys? That's the one guy. I mean, I can think of a couple others, but I thought it'd just be fun to put it out there just to see who do you think might pop in.
So short list, Kurt, because there's who else? Jack Campbell is on the list, and I just don't see it because they would go with Calvin Pickard, and if Pickard didn't go, they'd go back to Skinner. Yeah. So I don't see that.
I wonder about Phil Kemp. There'd need to be an injury, but that's why I bring up his name.
Need to be two injuries.
Two injuries. Yeah, 2 injuries. Yeah. Is there anyone else on defense that they have in? Because what's his noodles? Troy Stetcher is injured, right? He's getting surgery if he didn't already have it.
He did already have it, and he's out till August.
Yeah, I think Kemp is the next guy up. He's the guy that has come up and been a placeholder.
Not Gleason. Gleason's not here.
He's here.
Kemp's skating with the team.
When a defenseman has sat out, Kemp is the guy that's been the placeholder. So
cool.
He's been taking practices ever since Stetcher went out. He's been the 8th guy.
Well, he's a calm player, safe player. So big guy. He's a big guy. Mm-hmm.
If he gets in there, it's a suggestion that Edmonton's in a little bit of difficulty.
I would agree.
Depending on, obviously, like say, 2 guys that get hurt, because DeHarnay would be the first one in.
Yeah.
And he's played 2 minutes and 3 seconds in the NHL, all of it at forward. Weirdest debut I can remember.
The other guy who I think maybe has a chance is Adam Ernie.
He's hurt.
Is he hurt right now? That I hadn't heard.
I think Bob Stauffer said that on Oilers Now, that Adam Ernie's hurt.
I hadn't picked up. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we are on to the final of the 9 points, Bruce McCurdy. What is it?
Yeah, this would be top of a lot of analyst lists by boilerplate. Goaltending. And showdown between goalie Bob, Sergei Bobrovsky, and also of course Stu Skinner, and potentially the backup goalies, which Florida has former Oiler Anthony Stolarz, who led the league in goals against average this year.
Bunny LaRock.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they gave him. I think they cherry picked his games a little bit, but Edmonton never gave the guy a look, and maybe they should have. Anyway, that's a sideshow. The main thing is goalie Bob, and his in the playoffs 12-5. 1 loss record, 220 goals against average, 908 save percentage, which is good but not great. And the combination of 220 and 908 tells me that Florida's only given up about 24 shots per 60 minutes. And that's been one of the things that shone through in the playoffs, is teams are very strong at shot prevention. We saw a whole series of that between Nashville and Vancouver. But Edmonton, it's a lot of games that they've only given up 20, 22 shots. And so it comes down in the end to the goalies who are going to make the save. And now Bob is, he's got a long and fairly glittering track record, although he's now 35 years of age. And, typically he's He's been good in the playoffs and, actually better in the regular season than playoffs, just going by his raw stats. But he can get hot. There was a game this year where Florida beat Edmonton 5-1 in Edmonton. This was right after the famous Vasilevsky game where Vasilevsky made about 250 saves. And this was a game, the very next game, and the Oilers pumped 30-odd shots on Bobrovsky and got one past him, and he was just almost impregnable in that game. For Edmonton, Skinner actually didn't see the Panthers this year. It was Calvin Pickard who played both games. Florida won 5-3 at home with an empty netter and 5-1 in Edmonton in a game that was way closer than that, but it just wasn't Edmonton's night, and Florida just had their way with the Oilers. But the primary battle between, the cagey 35-year-old and the young up-and-coming 25-year-old will be a real feature showdown of this series and a huge challenge for Mr. Skinner.
The thing that strikes me about this is that Skinner, in the first two series, I think you could make the case that he was perhaps considered the best goaltender in those series because we knew that Vancouver starter wasn't playing, right? The last series, I got to say, while I had high hopes, I wasn't convinced that he would be able to outplay Jake Ottinger, and he did. And the fact that he's done that, I wonder if he can pull that rabbit out of a hat again. I wonder if it gives him that extra dollop of confidence. It certainly does me. Like I was a believer in Stuart Skinner before, but when you beat a goaltender of the quality of Jake Ottinger, you're doing something right. And so I think Bob I think you're fair to think he's probably the best goaltender in the series going in. It'll be interesting to see if he is when we're done.
In Dallas, I was listening to a podcast or two after the series, and they still couldn't quite figure it that Skinner had outplayed Ottinger. At least some of them couldn't. They just couldn't see it. They couldn't believe it, even though they'd seen it. Mm-hmm. It was so outside their expectation that they couldn't own it and admit it. That some of them that Skinner had done this, pulled this off, but he had outdueled the great Jake Ottinger, and I think it was not that close even. Like Ottinger letting goals, just didn't make enough saves, big saves, not close, and Stu Skinner did. So going into that series, I never would have predicted that. I thought Dallas was going to beat the Oilers in 7 because of goaltending, because I just wasn't confident that Skinner could get it done over Ottinger based on what I'd seen. And what I was forgetting is the hot and cold nature of Stu Skinner throughout the season. Throughout his early career at the Oilers, he's had hot and cold streaks, and he gets hot, and he's a darn good goalie. And something was made of this this psychological coach. He's got Mumford who's working with him. Goaltending is so much between the ears, and I think Stu Skinner has been through the fire. Now, what happened in the Vancouver series, the pressure on him coming back in those games, what it would mean to his career. If Stu Skinner had not got it done against Vancouver, the Oilers would have had to find another goalie this summer.
Very possibly.
In order to win. Because they couldn't go into the season counting on him. If he had done it 2 years in a row, not getting it done in the playoffs, we're done with you. Our bet on you will keep you, but we can't bet on you anymore. And they would have had to get another goalie this summer. That's what was facing the Oilers and Stu Skinner as he enters Game 6 against Vancouver and gets the start again, gets thrust into the game again. And he came through, and he just kept getting better and better and better until that unbelievable Game 6 that he just had before our eyes. And I guess I can understand why the Dallas fans can't get it, because it's kind of hard to get, but he has been that good in the regular season, Stuart Skinner. He's been like outstanding for stretches of periods of time. And right, if he's playing that game and the Oilers are playing their, don't give up on man rushes game and don't watch for the danger man game, be aware of what's coming from behind the net, but worry about the guy coming into the slot more. They can give Stuart Skinner that edge, and that's all he needs. He can stop that first shot, and he might get it done. I don't know. I don't know if he will or not.
I have to say, of all the moves and adjustments and in-series switcheroos that Chris Knobloch has done in these playoffs, the gutsiest and ballsiest and correctest move was to pull Stuart Skinner in the Vancouver series and then come right back with him 2 games later after Pickard had lost one game. Because the game Pickard lost 3-2, he was the best Oiler.
Yeah.
And it would have been a very easy decision to say, well, let's stick with the guy who's playing. It's not his fault. Let's put him back in there. And I think Knobloch's strategy all along is we'll give Pickard the 3rd loss, and then we're going to come back with Stu. And if Stu hadn't played in Game 6 because they were sticking with Pickard and they lost it, like you say, I think next year it would be all bets are off. We're looking for new goalies this summer because Stu didn't get it done. And, even the game 3 that he lost 4-3 to Vancouver, like they were picking corners, and sometimes other guys just make their shots, right? I mean, ask Jake Ottinger about that.
Yes, that's fair, Bruce.
Since he came back, 8 games in a row, 2 or fewer in 7 of them, and just 1 game where he was penetrated for more than 2 goals, and that's a winning formula for Edmonton Oilers. For sure.
I was looking at the list of Oilers UFAs. We haven't talked much about postseason and free agency, but boy, I'd be surprised if Cal Pickard doesn't get another contract from Edmonton after what he delivered to them this year.
I think he's coming back, yeah. I just want to end with one final thing that came up today, because some people were talking about how Dallas seemed to run out of gas against the Oilers, possibly due to the tough competition of Vegas and Colorado in the first 2 rounds. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it just made
Game 6.
It just made me think back. Well, exactly. They run out of gas? It didn't look like it. But it did make me think back to like the key moment in the playoffs for the Oilers may have actually came before the playoffs. It's that game between, I think, LA and Chicago. Last game of the year, where LA, I think, scored a late goal.
They pulled the goalie.
Yeah, and they scored a late goal, and that meant that the Oilers faced LA instead of Vegas in the first round. So that last seemingly meaningless regular season game between Los Angeles and Chicago, huge for the Edmonton Oilers. And that just shows you how luck plays into this whole thing. It's just, you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, first Vegas had to lose on home ice to Anaheim on that night to give LA that shot. Then LA almost blew it. They had a lead in the 3rd period and they fell behind. And if they lost in regulation, it would have been the Vegans playing Edmonton in the first round. And that would have been there's no way to know how that path would have worked out. But the way it did go through LA, through Vancouver, and through Dallas, who had done Edmonton, in retrospect, the favor of knocking off the last 2 Stanley Cup champions. It worked out, the matchups obviously worked out well for Edmonton that they won all 3 series.
You know who we've barely talked about, and I want to make a point now. We've barely talked about Matthew Tkachuk tonight. And I want to bring it up within this frame. It's remarkable to me how many Calgary Flames fans there are out there that say that they're cheering for the Florida Panthers in the series. And on one hand, I get it. If you feel like you're a mortal enemy of the Edmonton Oilers, you think, no, they're not Canada's team. I'm not cheering for them. But if they're cheering for Florida, they're literally cheering for the guy who turned his back on your franchise and walked out of town and left you cold.
And he did
really?
it. And he did it.
Really? You're cheering for him?
And his primary reason, Kurt, was he thought Florida had a better chance of winning than Calgary. That's what he said.
Wrong.
And that was a hell of a Calgary team when you look at that lineup that they had. And that team has just completely been decimated since that. It's not been decimated. It's not just 1 out of 10 guys. It's like 1 out of 10 who are left.
The Oilers wrecked it.
Yeah, the Oilers just destroyed. They just obliterated that team.
So it just
So
gets me that these Flames fans are cheering for him in Florida now. Really?
they're
Really?
just saying that. They're not even going to watch. They're just saying that to troll people. I mean, I could never. I've kind of softened on cheering for other Canadian teams as this drought has continued. Like when Calgary went to the Cup Finals in the early 2000s, I did not cheer for them. I was hoping they would lose. But I think now, if a Canadian team got to the finals, because the drought has been so long and because it's becoming a thing, for what it's worth, I would be cheering for them. Like nobody really cares if the fans from the other city, maybe Sportsnet wants them to cheer for them because they get more people watching the games. But I think I could bring myself now to cheer for whatever Canadian team, including the Toronto Maple Leafs, if they were going for the Stanley Cup, because I want a Canadian team to win. I really do.
I thought you were going to say if they were any good.
They are pretty good. I don't know if they're going to be good once they trade Mitch Marner, but they're a good team.
I want a Canadian team to win in 2024. Enough of this nonsense. Let's get her done
hear you,
right
Bruce.
now.
Let's get her done. We don't have to worry about it for another 20
Bring it back to Edmonton. And
Here
yeah. Here we are. We've been here before. My most vivid Cup year was actually 1990. I remember it. Of all the Cup years, for some reason, and I don't know why, it's the one that stands out most for me. Maybe because it was unexpected and such a miracle, and it was so dramatic the way they came back against the Jets. And this Cup year has that vibe to it as well. The Oilers start of the season, tough series against Vancouver, came back against Dallas. So this has been plenty dramatic. And man, that'd be fantastic if they can beat Florida, and the best is yet to come. And it may be the only team that can beat the Edmonton Oilers, and I still hold to this, Kurt, is the Edmonton Oilers. If
haven't done it yet.
All those players play their best games and are conscientious, diligent, fanatical defenders, they will win. They will beat the Florida Panthers. No team can beat the Edmonton Oilers. If it comes to a battle, the Oilers have the best talent. No doubt about it. The Oilers have the best talent. So it comes down to, are they willing to sacrifice as much as the other team? Are they willing to defend as hard as the other team? That's the team with the most talent. That's their challenge. And I think there's a chance. I'm picking the Oilers. Oilers in 6.
Me, Oilers in 7.
We won't make you pick, Bruce.
Oilers in 7.
All right, Bruce. We didn't even force you to pick, and you said it.
I was ready to reach in and twist your arm. I didn't have to.
I like 6 better. 6. You want the home fans to experience the joy like they just did in the conference finals.
Yeah, I like Oilers in 6.
7's tense.
7 is tense. It'll be back in Florida, and that'll be hard, just like it was hard back. And just that reminded me, I was thinking of injury again. Injury turned the last time the Oilers were in the Cup Finals. Dwayne Rollison gets knocked out in the first game.
Changed everything.
Terrible things happen on the road to the Stanley Cup. So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Well, it's been a joy doing these, working at the Cult of Hockey all through the decade of darkness. And as the McDavid eras come on board, and Kurt's come on board during the McDavid era. And here we are. It's going to be
Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
I've only been writing about this team for 16 years. About the same for you, David, since you started up the
Cult of Hockey.
07, was it?
Yeah, I wrote I
years.
used to write profiles of the Oilers in the 80s. I wrote big profiles of Messier, Anderson. I was working for the weekend Sunday section, and I Tikkanen and those.
Right. I like that.
Muckler, Bob Johnson. Yeah, that was a great. It was fun as a young guy to be able to do that. I've never actually covered sports full time. I think that's a really hard job, honestly, to do that. I think that's a really hard grind to be following the team around. And anyway, we're
a lot of 8-hour flights coming up this week.
Yeah, exactly. You're away from home a lot.
There and back. Wow.
Yeah. All righty. Go Oilers. Thanks for talking, guys. Thanks for talking, Kurt. Thanks for talking, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been the Stanley Cup edition the Cult of Hockey podcast.